Today, one of the most common resources in our modern-day world is paper, but we don't often realize that. There's such an abundance of this material that we often take it for granted. Most historical records point to China as being the first to discover paper, at around 105 AD. A man named Kai Lun, a Han Dynasty eunuch, is often recognized as the inventor of paper. In fact, paper was most likely discovered on accident. It was initially used by the Chinese for wrapping. Nevertheless, with a bit of refinement, it became increasingly more popular, and soon it was the standard writing material in many aspects of life in China. The art of paper-making traveled slowly westward, reaching Samarkand in Central Asia and, in the 8th century, Baghdad. When the Arab armies conquered Central Asia, they discovered paper and were able to see its practicality and usefulness. So, a paper mill was set up in Baghdad. This was how paper was introduced to the Islamic world. Paper was a less expensive way of manufacturing parchment, since it was made from cheaper materials. Unlike paper, parchment was made from animal skins, which made it harder to produce. Paper was also less subject to cracks, which led to replacing papyrus. Along with these factors, paper had the capability to absorb a lot of ink, which made it difficult to erase or smear. By the 9th century, paper had proved to be so useful that hundreds of shops in Baghdad were created to sell both paper and books. Words, like the words of the Quran, were central to Islam. Oral literacy was of high value, but the availability of paper made writing increasingly more important in Islamic culture. Now, what other uses do paper have to Muslims? To start off, paper was and still is a material basis for books, but it was also used for so much more. In the Islamic world, it was used to create an order of payment, similar to our modern-day checks. People would turn to paper when creating maps, battle plans, architectural plans, musical notation, and for both mathematical and scientific use. In addition, it was extremely useful to Islamic artists. Artists could use paper to easily trace and transfer designs and patterns to create an all-over look, one that became a distinctive feature of Islamic visual culture. Paper became the material basis not just for books and literature, but for the Islam art form, miniature painting, as well. As the paper industry continued to grow in Islam, it continued its move west, by Muslim merchants traveling the Silk Road. One of Islam's largest contributions to the West was paper. Jonathan Bloom, author of Paper Before Print, says how Islam seldom gets credit for this contribution to Western life, one integral to advances in every aspect of the sciences and the humanities. This contribution he is referring to is simply the fact that without Islam, paper may not have been introduced to the West until the 13th century, when Marco Polo visited China. It is interesting how something so simple could become one of the greatest inventions yet, and one to be used by various cultures and countries around the globe.